All right. Hey, Elevate, Omaha, Fremont, Millard. Good to see you guys. Just want to let you know we are kicking off a new series. We finished our last one last week. This week we're starting this new series called Listen, Hearing God's Voice. And I just want to start out with a game tonight. You know, we're coming out of this awesome time of worship, but I love starting out with some games, especially when it comes to this type of game. Let's see, I don't want to give away what kind of game this is. If you just think that you're pretty smart, I need a volunteer. I need a couple volunteers to come up here. If you think, yeah, I'm pretty smart, I'm kind of a big deal, I'm a genius. Who are my geniuses out there? Okay, there's one. Seniors, we got like a really smart. Carson, you seem smart. 2, Elijah, Tyler. Okay, yeah, right there, yep. Okay, you guys, all you. Okay, yeah, and you, I see you back there, yeah, yep. All right, here's the deal. Come on up here. Some of you guys, you might know this game. If you know it, don't just give it away, okay? I'm going to ask you a question, and then you're going to have to answer, okay? Listen very closely. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. Are you listening? Yes. Rice, rice, rice. Everybody wants some rice. Good rice, bad rice. Do you want some rice? Was that good rice or was it bad rice? You just got to answer. Was it good or bad? If you think it's good rice, put your hand up.
Hold on, I got to think first.
No. Just, you should know. If you're listening, you should know if it's good or if it's bad. You're saying good? You're saying good? You're saying good? You're saying good? What do you think? Bad? You think bad rice? He's saying good. What do you think?
I'm going to be different and say bad.
You're saying bad? If you said good rice, you're correct. That was very good rice. You can stay up. You can stay up. Try it again. Try it again. Rice, rice, rice. Everybody wants some rice. Good rice, bad rice. Do you want some rice? Was that good rice or bad rice? Put your hand up if you think it's good. Leave your hand down if you think it's bad. You think it's good? You think it's good? All you guys, you think it's bad? It was bad. It was just terrible. Terrible rice. You do not want to eat that rice. Are you listening? If you just listen, you'll know. Listen to the words coming out of my mouth. Rice, rice, rice. Everybody wants some rice. Good rice, bad rice. Do you want some rice? All right, was that good rice or bad rice? Help them out. That's good rice. You want to eat that rice. It was so good. Rice, rice, rice. Everybody wants some rice. Good rice, bad rice. Do you want some rice? Is that good rice or bad rice?
Bad rice.
That was bad rice.
Yeah, I got it now. I got it.
Do you really got it?
I got it.
Okay. What about you guys? Do you think you know? You think you know? All right. You listening?
Yeah.
Rice, rice, rice. Everybody wants rice. Good rice, bad rice. Do you want some rice? Good or bad?
Good rice.
That was good. That was good. He might actually have it. He might actually have it. Did you guys think that was good rice? No, you didn't think so? Check this one out. Rice, rice, rice. Everybody wants some rice. Good rice, bad rice. Do you want some rice?
Bad rice.
That's bad rice, right? All right. You guys, you can leave the stage. Head on out. Some of you, I think you might get it. Some of you, I'm not so sure. Noah, we'll have to check later and see if you really know. It's a tricky little thing. Some of you guys out there, you might think you know. You might have no idea. Some of you in Fremont, Millard, if you think you know, just go tell Andrew or Jamie or Adam after. We'll test you guys, see if you really know. I love that game. I love just messing with people sometimes with those type of mind games. Some of you guys, you're frustrated and you don't get it. You know, what's the difference between good rice and bad rice? I love that game because it gets you to focus on listening. You start to listen in a way that you've never listened to before. And when you finally figure out what the key is to understanding if it's good rice or bad rice, you just smack your head because it was so obvious. But in the moment when you didn't know, before somebody finally told you or before it finally became clear to you, you were looking at all these different things, listening for all these different things, and they were the wrong things. And I want to tell you, in this type of game, these mind games, these riddles, these puzzles, you have to retrain how you listen. And that's what we're going to talk about in this series called Listen. So many of us, we want to hear from God. We just want an audible voice to speak to us into our lives, and we want it to be God, and we want him to just tell us what to do at times. I mean, maybe you've been in that moment where you're just like crying out and saying, God, just tell me what you want me to do, because I don't know. And you've had those experiences where you just say, God, if you're real, speak to me right now. Let me hear you. Come down in a burning bush. Speak to me audibly so I can hear you like you did in the Old Testament. I mean, I believe if we're really honest, we all want that experience with God. We want to have that moment where we just hear him loud and clear speaking into our lives because we feel like he is silent. I want to tell you tonight, he is not silent. We just have to retrain ourselves on how we listen. When you learn how to listen, you'll start to find you can hear God's voice in your life. We've got a lot of noise and distractions in this world. I mean, if you think about it, you've got a cell phone on you at all times, some of you. You're surrounded by screens wherever you go. TVs, computers, they're everywhere. You're surrounded by music in the car. You hear these little beeps on your phone and you instantly got to check what it is. We are in a world full of noise and distractions, and they hit us 24/7. I just read about this study. There's a group of scientists, and what they study is interruption. There's a whole group of scientists dedicated to studying interruption. They figured out how much time goes between each interruption for the average human in America. Does anybody know how much time goes between interruptions? Do you think you could wager a guess? Like, how much time do you have in between interruptions throughout your day? Like, you're working on something and you get interrupted. Like, it could be your brother, it could be your sister, it could be, you're working on homework and a teacher says, all right, that's it, put your pencil down. They interrupt your work process. It could be your phone. Maybe you're working on something, maybe you're doing something, you're watching a show, and all of a sudden you get a text. That could be an interruption. How much time does the average American have between interruptions? What do you think? Anybody want to wager a guess? 10 seconds? That's pretty low. What do you think? Yeah, Justin. 9 minutes? Okay, that's high, that's low. I'll tell you, 3 minutes. That is how much time we have between interruptions. 3 minutes. I thought, man, that sounds low. Like, I know that can't be true. And I just read that. And literally, like in the office, I told Andrew that. And we went back to work. And it wasn't more than a minute later, Mark Chitwood, the senior pastor, comes in and starts talking to us. And it was like, well, okay, that's an interruption. I mean, he's cool. We like talking to him. But it is technically an interruption. And so we talk for a while, and he leaves, and we go back to work. And then 10 seconds later, one of the Kidman pastors comes into our office. We're like, all right, there's another interruption. We've got, a minute. We've got 10 seconds. We go back to work after that. I mean, it seriously, throughout the entire day, I started to notice in a way I'd never noticed before. And I guarantee it's 3 minutes, maybe less, between interruptions. I got a text, I got an email, I had all these alerts, all these different things happen throughout the day, right in the middle of me working on something, me focusing on something. And it was never very long between each interruption. And I bet if I average it out, it probably would be 3 minutes by the end of the day, maybe less. We live in a world full of noise. And that noise is drowning out the voice of God. Let me read this passage to you tonight. If you guys got your Bibles, you want to follow along, 1 Kings 19, verse 11. Check this out. 1 Kings 19, verse 11. The Lord speaks to Elijah. God says to Elijah, "Go out and stand before me on the mountain," the Lord told him. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by, and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks were torn loose. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was a sound of a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And a voice said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Earthquake, wind, fire. Surrounded by all this noise, all this distraction, when he finally hears God's voice, it's in a whisper. We live in a loud world full of distractions, full of noise. It's no wonder we can't hear God's voice. It comes in a whisper. There's moments, some of you guys, you've seen my daughter. She's 4, going on 5. And there's moments where she wants to tell me a secret. And so she'll say, come here. And I'll get like really close and she'll just like whisper something. And I can barely make out what she's saying. She'll like grab my shirt and pull me in. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And she'll tell me a secret like, I fed the dogs. Okay, I don't know why that's a secret, but good job. Good job, honey. I'm glad you did your chore. We give her chores at 4, you know. You got to teach them young. So we gave her this chore, and she wanted to whisper that to me. And in that moment, a whisper, it draws you in because you can't hear it from far away. You have to lean in close. And I think that's why God speaks to us in a whisper. He wants to be close. We get so distracted in this world and so far away from him by everything we're interrupted by. And he just wants us to lean in for a moment to be close to him. I think that's one of the reasons he whispers when he speaks to us. If you guys got Bibles, flip with me now. 1 Samuel 3, 1 through 10. This is back in the Old Testament days. It says, meanwhile, the boy Samuel served the Lord by assisting Eli. Now Samuel, he was just a kid at this time. Now in those days, messages from the Lord were very rare, and visions were quite uncommon. One night, Eli, he was a priest, he was a prophet, he was a big deal. He was who God used to speak to the people at that time. One night, Eli, who was almost blind by now, he was pretty old, he'd gone to bed. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was sleeping in the tabernacle near the ark of God. Suddenly, the Lord called out, Samuel! Yes, Samuel replied. What is it? He got up and he ran to Eli. Here I am, did you call me? I didn't call you, Eli replied. Go back to bed. So he did. Then the Lord called out again, Samuel! Again, Samuel got up and went to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? I didn't call you, my son, Eli said. Go back to bed. Now, he's probably pretty annoyed at this point. I mean, nobody likes getting woken up in the middle of the night. Samuel did not yet know the Lord because he had never had a message from the Lord before. So the Lord called out a third time, and once more Samuel got up and went to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? Then Eli realized it was the Lord who was calling the boy. So he said to Samuel, go and lie down. And if someone calls again, say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. So Samuel went back to bed, and the Lord came and called as before, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel replied, speak, your servant is listening. I love the Old Testament because we get these stories about God audibly speaking to his people. The story of Samuel, it looks a lot like the story of Moses and the burning bush. It was the same call. He called out, Moses, Moses, called his name twice to get his attention, which you'd think a burning bush would get your attention anyway. But a burning bush that speaks, that would definitely grab your attention. And they finally listened to God in that moment. Samuel had a hard time recognizing it as God's voice. It wasn't obvious to him. I think for a lot of us, we have a hard time recognizing God's voice. And it's because we've been so saturated in a world full of noise, we don't know how to listen or what to listen for. We have to retrain ourselves to listen. And I want to tell you, some of you guys in here, you probably still have some doubts about whether or not God is even real. And you probably still want to hear his voice audibly. And you think, man, if I could just hear that, that would make everything so clear to me. But I want to tell you, God has spoken, but audibly, that's just a thin slice of the way God speaks. If you've ever doubted that you've heard God's voice, let me just remind you about this. In Genesis, God says 4 words. He says, let there be light. In the beginning of creation, he said, let there be light, and then he created everything we see. His voice is creation. You have seen and heard God's voice. When you look at creation, when you look around the world at its complexities, the beauty in it, that's God's voice. You have heard his voice. You just didn't realize it. You didn't know what to look for. You didn't know what to listen for. That's one of the ways he speaks. Another way he spoke was through Jesus. They also call Jesus the Word. He is God's living Word. That was one way that God chose to speak to us. And now today, we have his living Word. It is living and active. It is sharper than a 2-edged sword. It pierces our hearts when the words are read. That is how God has chosen to speak to us. We want this audible voice to call out to us in the desert. We want to hear him. We want to see a burning bush. But I'll tell you this, Moses and Samuel, they would be jealous of us. In fact, right now in heaven, they're probably looking down, and if some of you in here are doubting this, they're saying, yes, I would much rather have this than what I had. His voice would come and go. It wasn't a constant thing, but here we have his voice with us at all times. We just leave it sitting in our room or sitting on a bookshelf collecting dust. Some of you that have been frustrated with never hearing God's voice, he's frustrated that you're not opening it up and listening to his voice. It's right here. But we refuse to listen. If you want to hear God speak, open up his word and you will hear his voice. If you want to hear God speak, seek silence. That's really what you have to do in a world full of noise. Blaise Pascal once observed, the sole cause of a man's unhappiness is that he does not know how to stay quietly in his room. In a world full of noise, in a world full of distractions, all these things that we think would make us happy, they don't. They leave us feeling empty inside. That's what Blaise is saying here. If you could just spend 10 minutes in silence a day and listen to God whisper into your life, you would find contentment and joy like nothing else in this world can offer. Here's my challenge for you. All of us, if you want to hear God's voice, if you're sick of feeling like you've never heard it, like you have no clue whether or not God is real or whether or not he could really speak into your life, take this challenge. Go home tonight and the rest of this week until next Wednesday and block out 15 minutes. Go to your room, shut the door, turn off your phone, shut the computer screens, unplug the TV, whatever you have that could be a distraction. Tell your parents, tell your siblings, listen, leave me alone for 15 minutes, no interruptions. And sit in the silence. For the first 5 minutes, open up his word and let him speak into your life. If you don't know what to read, find something like Ephesians or Galatians or Philippians, or read through the Gospels. Read for 5 minutes, close it, and sit in silence for the remaining 10 minutes and listen for God to whisper into your life. It might not be audible. It might not be a burning bush that shows up in your room, but at some point, you're going to sense it. You're going to feel it. You're going to know his word is speaking into you, and it's changing you, and it's calling you to do something, to change, to challenge you, to shift your view, and to draw you close to him. If you want to hear God speak, spend 5 minutes in his word and spend 10 minutes in silence. He'll change your relationship. When you go into your room, one of the things I want you to say at the very beginning, repeat the words of Samuel. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Repeat after me. Right now, right here in this room. Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. Now say it like you mean it. Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. And wait for him to speak. And wait for him to whisper. Let's pray. God, help us to find silence in our life. Help us to block out moments where we can listen to your voice. And help us to open your word, read it. God, I pray that you would speak to us through your word. Teach us how to listen. In your name we pray. Amen.